members of the Citizens' Army, I want to thank you for your courage, your spirit, your discipline, and your commitment to the cause. It has been an honor to serve with you.
Tranona Day Downing and Trochu Lauda Brown Millinigades a Shady Egg. Ballieg Lichele, na rebellione head Darrenacha, a Yale San Iria Mach, Agus Tugga go Barrack Richmond yet. Irina Kaiki Shane Yeshin, where fi Querachun a Yega Koch and Bosch for Loch na Belair, a Briezun Hilvinen. Vi Lavik Seachtar Dearmadta in a Maas Hain, nor a Hina Sheed for Ogra Public na Heron. Ach níl na cúisna foin chuirg an Seachtar eile chun báis chomh soiléir céine. Bhí aithne bha I gais lean leach lia cuideacha. Bhí ró lárnach daoine eile sa cha. Na gás na áirithe, bhí impreacht na breataine I buint díalta semach hana naide. Agus bhí daoine eile nach raibh smacht bithe ar an scéal, ach a bhí páirteach ar aon nós. Díach an Seachtar fear seo an prices éirde as buntlach na saoirse a leagin, agus dá roch an más, scéal agus dá na héireann go deo.
Rugab Michael Mallin in Octig Seachtar Cahar Imlát Lias na Saoirse. Bhí sé caitínta go maith daoine Imlát Lia Gholisteach san Aram ar waile Stíomh-Atháil de bhar bochtan is gomininic. I gás Michael Mallin áfach is cosúil gur tradiisiún Winsere bechúis leis. Heh bháthair bhí go leor daoine in Aram na Breataine. Agus thug antín leis Michael cuairt chorach Cheildara nuair bhí sé cheithre bliana dé dhaois. Agus chua banna ceol an Aram go mórmór I bhaimimeir, agus heasta bhaid héana a bheith pársach san obair seo. Agus mar sin listáil sé a bhiúsaléirí riaga na Halabun.
Cé go raibh na tistí in na poblatánig, deirtar go raibh gur minic an trid a bheith idir é héin agus a athair agus iad ag caint faoi eile héad a rud. Athair ba náisiúna é, agus a bháthair bhí si antugad don náisiún agus. Cé go raibh gaolta ag I féin idir Harracha in Aran Sasna as Royal Scots Fusiliers, Bertar Haran sin. Now, to be Saxon Aram, mar Dromador na Buchel Dromé. Bhí Jason ar bhar, bhí Jan Farga, go dúirt sé, look, just a simagam sa banna ceol. Ní chun tréide san Sasna agus san Aram, ag chun bheith mar Dromador go fes sa banna ceol.
For the first number of years that he was in the Royal Scots Fusiliers, they were stationed primarily in Ireland and England. But in 1896, the battalion, the 1st Battalion of the Royal Scots Fusiliers was sent to India. India was part of the British Empire at this time.
Bhí cinál éirí amach ar bun san Ind ag deire níú céad éig ag antar tíre. Bhí an pobl sin I mún ceanarcha an Aram na Breataine ag a deire chuir le rial na Breataine ar a tír. Agus ba chogad é nach raibh Aram na Breataine in an nach chuid leachta air. Seachas an chogaíocht fuairmálta effigiúil banós lob siúd. Bhí na daoine ag prod ar bhealach a del góib héin seachas Aram na Breataine.
Agus bhí Mallin sáirtíos teach an seo. Agus de chunig sé ag an am seo, cé có táhachtach is a bhí sé, ólas a bheith agat ar an dúí mágóid, local knowledge mar íortha. Guerrilla warfare don chéadúir, chunig sé an seo héig.
The terrain was very difficult. It was unsuitable for regular troops, and the native tribes used that to their advantage. They would draw the army into areas, particularly dried up waterways, and they would draw them into these areas and then they would attack and run. So it was essentially, to a large extent, hit and run tactics. inflict very heavy casualties and then be able to escape. They had the advantage of knowing the terrain intimately, which the British Army or which the regular soldiers didn't.
On the hill, watch your hill!
Mallin's only period of active service in India was during the Tirah campaign, and that was a campaign primarily again based in the north of India. He only really describes one battle in any sort of detail, and that was one in Mallin Pass. Just after the battle at Mallin Pass, Mallin was forced to sleep outside of his tent for security reasons, and during that night he seems to have contracted malaria. And he suffered regular recurrences and regular bouts of this illness throughout his time, and he was hospitalised on a number of occasions during his time in India.
Gus as na litrecha a scríomh Mallin chuig Callín na Éireann a hagan formhór an ólas atá going faoin sealach is an Ind. Agnes Hickey an tanam a bhíorthaí, agus fósach Mallinaí tamalaní é sin.
Nuair a bhí sé san Ind, de scrí sé chuig Agnes Hickey gach ile mí gan tep a fá so cibéad blianta agus sin an bailachan a cumad ar dangháil i chéile.
My Colleen Jas. I was lying in hospital when your loving letter came to me last week and I could not write. I am still in hospital, but well and strong again. This is the worst attack I have had in the country. I have fever and a touch of ague. I may have to go back to the front, but I don't think so. If I do, I shall let you know. The war is lasting a very long time, dear. We ought to leave the poor people alone, for I am sure they will never give in, and they have proved brave men. God help them.
On a letrach I scríomh Mallin on Inns a bhaile, is cosúil go raibh sé sin ag éirí báúil le muinte na hinse seachas le arm na Breataine.
Mallin would have come to consider the British campaign in India as an unjust one that was there really to take advantage of the natives. For example, much later on he wrote about an attempt by the British Army to collect a tax that they'd imposed on a native tribe by force.
If I were not a soldier, I would be out fighting for them. I wish it was for Éireann I was fighting, and not against these poor people. The British Army is a hell on earth. It is the likes of me that keeps mine and your country down. If ever I am to die by bayonet or bullet, I hope it is against it for Ireland. A day will come when we will be able to pay England back with interest all she has done to us. This is the last letter I write to you from India. I will be home a few days after it myself.
Dil Mallin ar Éireann sa bhliain 1902, tar éis 3 bliana déag a bheith caiteige in arm na Breataine. Fós sé Agnes Hickey, ban a bheith cúigear cluineige leithí. Agus fuair sé obair am leat lia mar iador siada chun an teileach a chanála gemacht.
So tháinig sé as níide go 2, agus de fós sé Agnes in níide go 3, agus der thuidir go Wellington Street, mas an bíidir cónaí dosach. Agus the Wellington Street in a Roma ahar na bhí sé mar bobbing.
Tell you what, this will change things, Agnes, I'm telling you. Let us then, with glad eyes, face the future. That's what I want to hear. Ireland salutes the rising sun. And within Ireland, Labour moves with the promise and potency of growing life and consciousness.
Mallin's first involvement in trade unionism was with the Silk Weavers Trade Union. Shortly after getting married, he began working as a silk weaver in Messrs Atkinson & Co. Poplin Weavers in Hanbury Lane. Trade unionism was on the cusp of a big boom. James Larkin soon after founded the Irish Transport and General Workers Union.
Ceapa Mallin ina rúnaí chearchumann na bhíodóirí am lá clia. Ach san am seo bhí fás mór a tíocht faoin cearchumanachas, agus cearchumanachas níos radachaí ag daoine mar Seamus Ó Lorcan agus Seamus Ó Conghaile.
Peter, is that the last load of the day?
It is, yeah, sure.
It's 1 o'clock out now.
I will.
Okay, get about here, let's check this. Yeah, we got to get to Liberty Hall. Take about 20 minutes, all right? Come on. I think Connolly's going to be speaking at this meeting. Yeah.
The great appear great because we are on our knees. Let us rise!
The Socialist Party of Ireland was very much connected to the trade union movement in Dublin. And there's no doubt, but for Mallin, his entry point into the Socialist Party was through the trade union movement, first of all through the secretary of the Silk Weavers Union, but also through his engagement with the Dublin Trades Council. Many members of the Socialist Party of Ireland were also involved in the Dublin Trades Council, and that's particularly important, I suppose, in terms of his later connection with James Connolly, because James Connolly was probably the most prominent personality in the Socialist Party of Ireland from 1910 onwards, after his return to Ireland from the United States.
Since the general exodus from the Union, after our good friend Jim Larkin left the city of Belfast, the exploiters of labour have piled outrage upon outrage and iniquity upon iniquity until every man in the port with a spark of manhood left was ripe for rebellion. It required a spark to ignite the magazine. That spark came in the fullness of time.
The Mallin again an áitin Russia gobar Atkinson's an slíana naibrochtú an sin ná is such piecework of bhí Diach for the rare a made siad a churchtú amach. An deachrach a bhí an sin ná go méid ar an fiad ar fannacht go dtí go bhuiach sé an bun ábhar agus níor íochagé ar bhí sé fannacht. Agus thar sin bhí ar cíos íoch the Atkinsons tuisc an spás bhí agus mar sin de. So bhí Mallin ag glóir sais galónt go méid ar a líad bunpáide agus faoihearra Harla Stalchan sin.
Let your readers know that the strike of weavers at Atkinson's Poplin factory is nowhere near settlement, and that the meaning of the notice...
The strike initially was about the underemployment of the weavers, but by April the employers decided to take a more aggressive approach to the trade union, and they offered re-employment, reinstatement to the trade union workers on the old terms, but they also offered the apprentices increased wages. The difficulty with that, obviously, was for the silk weavers, was that this would change the terms of their employment dramatically, and they refused to go back to work.
Keep your bribe. We want none of it. The journeymen weavers are out for the sake of our future, the future of us apprentices. We are the journeymen of tomorrow. Do you think we're going to sell our souls for 30 pieces of silver? That is the spirit of our apprentices.
However, the employers then from the 9th of April onwards began to employ scab labour, in other words non-unionised labour, and this outraged the Silk Weavers Union. So from there on until the strike ended in June 1913, the strike was one of principle as well as one around the issue of underemployment.
Lads, listen up.
Don Mallin agus na hubblirí eile Stalk feadh ceithre bhí. Sa deire Yale Atkinson dá Guidéileh agus daontaigh na fiadóirí fille ar an obair. Achas bu a beag a bhí Stalk Atkinson, a gomparáid leis an goga a bhí á thrid idir na Cumann Saothar agus fustóirí bhleá clia. Coga inar tháinig an crúr an táirne nuair a tharla lockout na bliana 1930.
The 1913 lockout was quite a polarised industrial dispute, and there was a great degree of violence. That the police were seen to be quite brutal at the time. There was a famous episode on the 31st of August when the police quite viciously attacked strikers and their supporters on O'Connell Street in Dublin. But there were other episodes of violence as well, from both the strikers and from people that continue to work and from strike breakers.
Ba haléir de Larkin agus Connolly agus daoine eile nachchiad. Nach raibh neart ar na sráide ag de fear. You know, nuair a ionsaigh na Paulíní iad, ní raibh ar ná an trid ar ais. So, I gardaí amach seo, chur Larkin agus Connolly agus Farla Bound de Fuite, Aram Carga de Hearn le Céile. Con trid ar son Ibrethe. Now, ní raibh gunnaí acha just cumáin nó bathaí agus mar sin de. Just con bheith ann con trid siar dá meach gá leis.
Bhí siopa ag Mallin in 1930 agus I measc go gcuid cosliméirí bhí riant Paulíní a cháil sé na costaméirí seo le líon na stailce. Is cosúil gur a cuid na Paulíní seo i mbuíochtá lá as an ionsaí a bhí zéantacha bar stailceoirí agus gur thug Mallin le fis gur a sesin ar thaobh na stailceoirí agus nach raibh éon dhéanaig ar bhrúdúlacht na Paulíní.
Siop tabak agus Michelin rudí mar sin. Now, bhí an sonna acu nuair bhí de fartha ceithre bliana I sráid na mí, agus bhí iad na bliana is sonna a bhí ag clán Mac Mallin. Agus an sin níos sin de hosnig an stailcmód a bhí ar an go dtí 1930.
Faoin mbliain 1930, bhí post Mallin sa bhannacha siada caite san éirige, agus bhreis sé ar bhrabús an teopa chun marachtáil. A chuir an lockout isteach go mór ar an gnó, agus bhí ar Mallin an siopa ar shráid na mí a díal. Thart ar nám seo freisin, bhfuil droch hinnas Mallin, agus chuirg na planana bhí aige don todhchaí I le taobh.
Bhí ar an targad an fuisiid ó dílú an tach I sráid na mí, bhí ar sin na cafe doctóirí agus mar sin. In fact, bhí sé bail báise an am.
Mr. Mallin.
Mr. Conley, what are you doing here? Please, take a seat. Thank you.
How's the health?
Fine fettle. Fine fettle. What can I do for you?
You served in the British Army, didn't you?
Yes. I hated it.
Well, that's something I have in common. But many a good man served in the British Army. There's nothing wrong with being well trained. It's knowing when to get out and use that knowledge to the advantage of your country. That's what I call makes a good soldier.
If a day comes where we can pay England back with interest for all she's done to us, I hope I am alive to help pay it.
I can always guarantee that the citizen army will fight. But I cannot guarantee that they will be on time for such a fight, should it take place. I need someone to knock them into shape. Put some discipline and fight back into them. I want you to take over the citizen army.
James Connolly appointed Michael Mallin as Chief of Staff of the Irish Citizen Army in October 1914. Connolly and Mallin worked very closely together to change the ethos of the Citizen Army, and they were quite interested in preparing the Citizen Army for guerrilla warfare, for the possibility of insurrection. So during 1915 in particular, both Connolly and Mallin gave many lectures and they wrote articles for the Workers' Republic.
Agus ins na léachtaí a thug sé den ICA, tá sé sa léir gúil sé rá local knowledge, sin an rud a chaithí a bheith agat. Ma hénta bhí tríide gunnamh arm for Malta ar nós arm sásanna, is na catharcha. No, fiúháin sa dúi. Ní gáid seasamh suas na gunnimh, ach úsáid a buint as an áite na bhfuil thú.
Now listen to me, boys. You have to start looking at the streets of this city through military eyes. Lanes and alleys are a great source of danger to regular troops. What's a street in military terms? A street is a defile, a narrow pass through which troops can only move by narrowing their front, making themselves a good target for the enemy. A mountain pass is a defile. A bridge over a river is a defile. A street is a defile.
Bhís na mala trálchogaíocht go bhfuil dís buntáiste áil rá arm mar a bhí an arm na Breataine agus a gcuid sin an tólas a bhíacha ar a gahar an takeíocht a bhíacha be meas muinte na carach a chuir chun leasa go péin agus bhí Mallin a tarint go sonrach a haithí ón ins nuair a chonig sé daoine san ins a rinne cogaíocht chun torsin an arm na Breataine.
When I was in India, I was sent to fight against some of the finest guerrilla fighters in the world. For over 6 months, a handful of poorly equipped tribesmen kept a whole regiment of British troops at bay. They compensated for a lack of arms and manpower by employing strategy and ingenuity.
Squad! Halt! Right turn!
When the time to fight comes, and believe me, it is coming, the real dangerous fighting will be done by small irregular bodies, hastily dividing, using anything capable of killing or wounding that lies ready to their hand. Boys, when we fight to win.
Mallin was quite heavily involved in securing rifles for the Citizen Army. He seems to have had quite a talent for coaxing rifles out of British soldiers. And when the family moved into the Emmett Hall in Seachtar, it had the benefit of being adjacent to Richmond Barracks. So the back wall of Emmett Hall was actually part of Richmond Barracks, and he seems to have spent a lot of time at the back wall of his house having rifles passed over the wall.
Every person who joins the Citizen Army has to give a commitment that when they join, they accept that one day they will go into battle. Now, it's not a huge force, of course. By 1916, it's still only got about 320 people in it, men and women. But he ensures that by 1916, everyone has a rifle.
The Citizen Army was unusual in the sense that it welcomed women with open arms. Now that was completely in line with Connolly's views. Connolly was quite strong on the issue of women's liberation and equality for women, and in that sense it held true for the Citizen Army. The most prominent female member of the Citizen Army, I suppose, was Countess Markievicz, who joined at the beginning. She faced quite a degree of opposition. Countess Markievicz was unlike most of the volunteers in the Citizen Army. To begin with, she was from the landed gentry, whereas most of the ordinary members of the Citizen Army were from working class Dublin, from the slums. In addition, she was suspected by some leading members of the Citizen Army of being too closely aligned with the Irish Volunteers. She had formed Na Fianna Éireann, which was allied to the Republican movement. And there were those that thought she was a spy for the Irish Volunteers.
Well, go luath rééis den chéad chugad an do bris amach pas gan IRB I cuiineh airíamach. Agus de ré mar bhí an plán seo á orbert ag an IRB, bhí sé de gaiirí níoch faoi James Connolly. Bhí Connolly anna oscailte faoin tuairim gur chóir airíamach a chur siúil go lua, as chuir sé sin imní ar an IRB. Mar dá an aireoch sé amach, is beag seans a bhí ann go mbeadh an bua aige, tá sin raibh mór an fearige péis céala. Ach bheadh an bua lán go néanthach na húdaráis éine raibh áras ortha na héamh a choháil, agus a tlí sin ní bheadh seanstálaid ag an IRB dul raig leis an plán bhí go féin. Mar sin bharrtaigh siad Connolly a thuirte le taobh labhart leis iarigéir gan bula raig leis an plán bhí go héin ach fannacht agus íireachta dhéanamh ina damta siúd.
Ar an 9 den óir 1960, tháinig an scéala chomh fada le Mallin agus Markievicz, nach raibh tásc ná tuairisc ar James Connolly.
It's been suggested that he was kidnapped by the IRB, but it's equally possible that he could have met up with IRB members and was invited to a meeting of the IRB Military Council. And this quite worried both Michael Mallin and Countess Markievicz, because there was a fear, I suppose, initially that he'd been taken by British forces, and then there was a fear that he'd been taken by the Irish volunteers and that his life could be in danger.
Mr. Connolly.
Mr. Mallin. I've just spent the last 3 days with Mr. Pierce and his friends from the IRB. They're planning an insurrection.
For when?
Soon, possibly Easter. And, as we suspected, they want our support.
Do they have a plan? A military strategy? Is it doable?
A general occupation of strategic posts throughout the country, and in Dublin, the General Post Office, the Four Courts, St. Stephen's Green.
Mr. Connolly, with respect, this goes against everything we've trained the men for. The lectures, the drills, we're all centred on guerrilla warfare, an element of surprise. We don't have the manpower or the firepower to carry out this type of offensive.
On the other hand, you don't start a revolution with rifles. You start first and get your rifles after.
Now, inis Connolly dó cad é an plan a bhí ann, bhí uafáilsir nach raibh dúirt sé féin plan B ann, just plan amháin agus dúirt sé, tá agin, a luithe is hosnaí an cóga titan na plan nás a chéile, caithí plan B a bheith ann, ach ní rá plan B ann. Agus mar acamar, níos déanaí bin botún mór, ach hí Mallin ina haidir uilte agus a landse ordathe a gánaí.
Is dóid gur cheap Mallin nach raibh mór an seans ag go bua san éirí amach. Ní raibh sé róthástal leis an blán a bhí le cí síos gan éirí amach. Ach bhí sé ggéire is dói fód a heasa, bhí sé ggéire seasa a dhéanana in aghaidh aram agus imprach na Breataine.
This war is the opportunity we've been waiting for. We should strike before the opportunity goes.
Le fada an lá, bhí sé daingean ina insin go mo cheart aram na Breataine a chuir amachchas éireann go mo cheart tíor hir a dhéanach a éireann. Agus má bhí trod le bheith ar siúl, bhí seis na gíre páirsa lecha an. Thug siad buil an aram isteach agus chuir siad an iúlgó go raibh trod a tíocht agus go mo cheart chomh olbó agus an am sin géiríomh ar obair an aram, géiríomh ar an tréanál ar an slóga, chuireamh agar níos ar fós orb mar bhí sacab go raibh éireamach ar a meallach.
Mallin was a very committed family man, and you really do get a sense that he was quite devoted to his family, but he was also very committed to the idea of eradicating British rule by physical force means. And he does seem to have been the kind of person who, once he was committed to something, he was very committed to it, and he was willing to do what was necessary regardless of the consequences.
Got the guns? You got the money? Show us the gun.
Mother, sweet divine, what happened?
It's only a scratch. I've had worse. I need you to know this. That if things go bad, the Citizens' Army are going to take the fight to the Dublin mountains.
What about the children? And me? We need you, Michael.
I know, love. I know. But I'm also a soldier. And as a soldier, I have to carry out my duty.
In the weeks leading up to the Rising, Mallin was quite heavily involved in the preparations, particularly around Liberty Hall. Liberty Hall was kind of the hub of activity. The Citizen Army spent the week prior to the Rising making homemade bombs and ammunition. The building was on constant armed guard as well, so Mallin would have been involved organising that.
Mallin himself, who has been allocated responsibility for Stephen's Green, he's out carrying out intense surveillance of the area around the Green and inside the Green itself. He's drawing up paperwork, he's looking for vantage points, and he's drawing maps, etc.
By Wednesday, the officers, or those who were to take commission as officers during the rebellion, were brought to James Connolly and Mallin, where they were told their roles and what was expected of them during the fighting.
Ariana chéasta ar díag do bhfuil an arm chathartha, cruinniúla chéile ag hallan na Saoirse ar an dónach. Ach le linn an deire seachtaine, úmpiaag pleanan na cóla mílite bunos ciún, nuair a gabhadh an lastas gunaí a heasta go géireótha amach ó hósta chiarí. Mar thora ar seo, dúirdaigh Ón McNeill gníomhach daoine an óglach ar ghabhna cásca a chur ar ceall. Chuir sé seo deire le héan seans a bhí an tús a chur le réabhlóid náisiúnta.
It's only by word of mouth and people delivering messages, couriers, that word has got to a sufficient number of people that it's back on, get here. A higher proportion of the Citizen Army than the Irish Volunteers do turn out on the day, but it's not a full turnout by any means, and that has consequences.
Governor Mallin, what's the latest report?
Captain Allred hasn't reported for duty, sir.
Captain Houston, how many men have you got with you from your company?
About a dozen, sir, so far.
I want you to take them and to secure the Mendicity Institute on Usher's Island. I want you to occupy it for as long as it takes Commandant Daly to secure the forecourts. Do you understand me?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Kerrigan, Lynch, with me.
Members of the Citizens' Army, attention!
For the first time in 700 years, the flag of a free Ireland will fly over the city of Dublin. We are going out to break all connection between the British Empire and this country and to form an Irish Republic. There no longer exists the Citizen Army or the volunteer force. Instead, we are joined as brothers and sisters in the Irish Republican Army.
What's the meaning of this? What's going on?
Halt! Get everybody out of the park. Hurry up and lock the gates. I want defensive barricades at every corner of the park. And tell the men to start entrenching. Go! Go!
Is cosol gur go leor bailí gur an tarm caithre níos dáíre, gur siad olamh daoine a bhharú chá mo gá. Bhí drochthaithe go leorach go bhar Napóleon ag an stalc, agus beidir fún díomhlas ar chun an óberteach.
You have no business!
Robbins! I want you to organise parties, to occupy the houses at every corner of the green. We need sharpshooters in any of the buildings that overlook our main defences. The Bank of Ireland, the Winter Palace at the corner, the Shelburne Hotel and the College of Surgeons. Got that?
Yes, sir.
Go! Go!
I'll not take orders from the like of you.
Michael Kavanagh was an elderly guest of the Shelburne Hotel, and his cart of theatrical props was commandeered by the rebels, and he was warned on a number of occasions by rebels in the Green to leave it where it was. He ignored those warnings and he was actually shot dead by the rebels.
Many of the Citizen Army volunteers were quite young. There were a lot of 17, 18-year-olds, and they were trigger-happy, probably nervous, and when faced by aggressive civilians who were antagonistic to what they were doing, they were quite aggressive in their response. Some of the civilian deaths appear to make no sense and were quite brutal. It's clear that some members of the Citizen Army were quite trigger-happy, and a number of the civilian deaths were without any justification whatsoever.
Who shot this man?
I shot him. He refused to leave, so I shot him.
Commandant Mallin, I've sent a detail of men to take over the bank, and I've set O'Leary and Doyle as snipers. But we don't have enough men to take the Shelburne and the college.
The college is the stronger fallback position. Occupy the college now. When more men arrive, we'll organise a party to occupy the Shelburne.
Yes, sir.
Is tócha go córa go mé cart fa cúig daoine ann ach ní rá. Ní rá go céad féin a céad go fear agus maná ag a féin. So, cá rá an plan B. Agus is duine a dtéirdan gur dhéann sé práiseach de cén fáin ar dlach sé leis an Austáin Shelburne me hápla. Conas éiteach sé. Ní rá, go leor fear aige. An Shelburne bheith trúcha da had chuig go duine a tastalhaid chun sin a dlacha agus é chamad.
Dói gres ag Mallin ó hús gur job an zachar a bhí ribh, bhí sta gira fathe mhór oscailsa a chuineáil a bhí timpplaí ag furigintí arda ó na bhéideach an áidionsaí dhéanarab agus sin é a tharla.
The British Army began to move stealthily towards the Shelburne Hotel. They entered the hotel and they set up machine gun nests at the top of the hotel, and they also installed snipers. So when they attacked early on Tuesday morning, the machine gunners and snipers had a perfect view over the park. Mallin's men were put under serious pressure, and he eventually had to order the abandonment of Stephen's Green.
There were not as many casualties as may have been expected. The women left first, entered the College of Surgeons, then the men were sent again then afterwards, and Mallin was one of the last to leave.
Gertí far amháin agus bhí Mallin rith amach. A fiúháin ground machine gun ag cathal leis sin agus é haring isteach. So bhí sé cró go freisin ag deirí leis gacéine ó thuir tras na slán an son.
Mr. Mallin, forgive me. I couldn't deliver your message to the GPO.
Thank you. I appreciate your efforts.
Bhí Aram na Breataine is seilah go leor gona furigin sí éagsúil an acaleob agus bhí siad a scaoile lob go tréin. Rinne Mallin coppla íireacht bris amachas. Chur sé daoine ag gur ionsaí a dhéanana na furiginsaí a rár na Breataine iontab ach ní raire le aon cheann gona honsaí sin i gharíre.
Certainly towards the end of the week, by Thursday, communication had ceased with all the other posts as the British Army were able to cordon off the areas where the rebels were stationed, and information was cut off. They very much, things had quietened down to a large extent in their area as well.
Agus is cosúil go nearna Mallin chomag sa béidir a charíre bhí sé sáinne áit nar bhéidir mór an na dhéanna. Agus faoi dhearan na seachtainna bhí sé smaoinú bhealach é cinnteile ach ar nó tháinig an géile an sin agus a chuir sé sin zéire leis an éirí amach.
I have here a dispatch from headquarters. In order to prevent the further slaughter of Dublin citizens, and in the hope of saving the lives of our followers, now surrounded and hopelessly outnumbered, the members of the provisional government present at headquarters have agreed to an unconditional surrender, and the commandants of the various districts in the city and country will order their commands to lay down arms. It is signed by the President of the Provisional Government, P.H. Pearce, and counter-signed by the Commandant of the Dublin Brigade, Mr. James Connolly.
A minority of the Citizen Army volunteers in Stephen's Green in the Royal College of Surgeons wanted to continue, but Mallin felt that as a soldier he should follow orders.
We have fought this fight as soldiers, so we must surrender as soldiers.
We should fight them to the hills, like we planned.
There was quite a degree of disappointment. There was a lot of emotion in the Royal College of Surgeons on hearing of the surrender, and it was very difficult for most people present.
Tránóna dé Downig an trochu lád a bhí abrán, Chróirigh Mallin an garastún amach as choláiste riagan na máinliachta agus dhéil siad. Tugad na rebelúnathe go dtí Barrack Richmond, áit ar animníag Mallin mar ghuine de cheannarí an éirí amach agus chuir a cuairtmhíleata ar an gúige lá de bhí bealtainna.
You, get up. Go to the back of the hall.
He was anxious, clearly, to save his own life. There's no question about that. He did not relish the possibility of a glorious death, of a sacrifice for the cause. He wanted to live, and he did his best to avoid execution.
I had no commission whatever in the Citizens' Army. I had verbal instructions from James Connolly to take 36 men to St. Stephen's Green and to report to the volunteer officer there. Shortly after my arrival, the firing started, and the Countess of Markievicz ordered me to take command of the men, as I had been so long associated with them.
And in fact, it could be said that he endangered Countess Markiewicz's life, because he quite clearly pointed to her as his commanding officer.
Bhí ag gágur fí chun báise go bhág fí a bhean agus ceart linne aice agus leanamhil ar a meallach agus gomach saoil tragóideach ach a béidir. Bhí sé ggéire a bheithe a hábháil.
My darling wife, pulse of my heart. This is the end of all things earthly. Sentence of death has been passed, and tomorrow the sentence will be carried out by shooting. And so must Irish men pay for trying to make Ireland a free nation. God's will be done. I am prepared, but oh, if only you and the little ones were coming too, we could all reach heaven together. My heartstrings are torn to pieces when I think of you and them.
Mallin was visited in a cell in Kilmainham by his wife Agnes, who was heavily pregnant at this time, his 4 young children, his mother, his brother Bart and his sister Katie. His son describes coming in to see his father.
Na honnig sé an tahar sin agus just ní eici mé ma ahar rí sin bus the cur of Weimar agus viidir rá Padracha on viidir agus just to be ma ahar a gol, you know. Ní rud an éad eile dhéanamh just sláán rá an ahar agus bin sin agus dúirt an tahar leis le Agnes le na bhean céile bhhailm go rathach My Little Man Joseph mar sagadórat agus úna mar ban rialta.
A husband's blessing on your dear head, my loving wife. A father's blessing on the heads of my children. James, John, Una, Joseph, my little man, my little man, my little man.
Minstrel boy to the war is gone. In the ranks of death you will find him.
Prisoner, about turn.
I do not believe our blood has been shed in vain. I believe Ireland will come out greater and grander. But she must not forget she is Catholic. She must keep her faith. I find no fault with the soldiers or police. I forgive them from the bottom of my heart. Pray for all the souls who fell in this fight, Irish and English. Goodbye, my wife, my darling. Your loving husband, Michael Mallin, Commandant, Stephen's Green Command.
Land of song, said the warrior bard. Though all the world betrayed thee.
Lord Jesus, receive my spirit!